Greetings, brothers at F.U.E.L. So glad to be back. I have a very special treat. We have one of our newest members, Pastor Rodney from First Baptist Church of Rockledge. And he had been to some of our meetings, and he generously offered to share some of his insight with his relationship with the Lord. So with no further ado, Pastor Rodney.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I don't like to stay behind the pulpit, so I'm going to hang around over here a little bit if I can. And it's good to see people on the right side, and, well, some aren't on the right side, but so there must be something about that side, I don't know. So this is going to be a little bit of participation. Is anybody having a bad day today? You can raise your hand, or you can throw something at me and I'll figure it out. Has anybody had a bad day in the last week or so? Only one, two? Three. It's kind of bad news. If you haven't had a bad day in the last week or so, guess what? Tomorrow's not looking too good, and the next day is even more. It's probably coming. And there are all kind of ways we have bad days. I think most of us probably have a bad day due to relationships at times. And sometimes it's the one you spend the most time with, the one you love the most, that you're having a bad day with. And we think of wives or maybe children or siblings, certainly co-workers. Sometimes it's even your grandkids or your kids or the boss at work or wherever. Sometimes we're having a bad day because of our own mind, our own thoughts, our own plans. I've got a friend who did a big study on all the different kind of ministries you can have in your life. And one of the greatest ones, one of the easiest, but one of the hardest is the ministry of interruptions. And I tell you what, I struggle with that. I'll be anything, anywhere, anytime, but if I'm not planning on this, it's like, oh, come on, you know. But I've learned to say, wait a minute, God's brought this to my door today, brought this to my life today. I need to be able to deal with this interruption. But like I said, a lot of it comes from our own insides, I think, that cause a bad day. Certainly our emotions, things like that. And I think we all probably struggle with pressures. And once again, those pressures may come from many things. The relationships, the health, the finances, the plans. And we kind of tend to think of pressure as a bad thing. And it can be. But of course, how we act and how we deal with it and how we respond to pressure, it may not be a bad thing. And certainly there's good pressure. And I think of things like the air pressure in a car tire. I can tell when one tire has got not enough air. It's pulling one way or the other. That's not a good thing. I want that tire to be fully inflated so I can, go where I want to go. I think of a pressure washer. One of the greatest things, if you have a wife, get a pressure washer. They love doing that. I think it's instant gratification. My wife will get out there and do the sidewalk or the pool deck, and I'm like, I don't think I would enjoy that. She enjoys that, and I'm thinking, man, all that pressure, it's kind of a release for her, but so we can't have good pressure in our life. I'm going to share with you today what some can view as maybe the worst day in the life of Jesus, except for the day of crucifixion, perhaps, right? And even then, he knew he was fulfilling his purpose. But we have things where, one thing goes bad in the morning and we kind of get through it, and then about noon, and then about 3 p.m., and then you're like, I'm going home. I know it'll be good there. And you get home, and you're like, one thing after another after another. Well, I'm going to read from you in the book of Matthew, chapter 14, starting in verse 13, where it seems that way for Jesus over and over again. And we know if we're going to be Christ-like, we need to be Christ-like, and that's a challenge. We're full of flesh. We're full of our own will. But if we can learn from all the love he had for others and all the ways he sacrificed his own self for others, we can also learn when he's having a bad day how to deal with it. So I'm going to pick up in chapter 4 in the book of Matthew. I'm going to try to read straight through. I tend to stop and start some when I preach, but I'm going to try to go straight through and then kind of go back and kind of unfold it a little bit more. Verse 13, chapter 14 of Matthew. He's just found out that John the Baptist has been killed, has been murdered, has been beheaded. In fact, I'm going to back up to verse 12. It says, Then his disciples came and took away the body of John the Baptist and buried it and went and told Jesus. Bad day, bad time number one of this bad day. It was a family member. It was a fellow brother in ministry. It was his cousin. And he's been told, killed. He had been in prison. I'm sure they were thinking and hoping things would work out the right way, and it certainly didn't work out the way that men wanted. So verse 13, when Jesus heard it, he departed from there by boat to a deserted place by himself. But when the multitudes heard it, they followed him on foot from the cities. And when Jesus went out, he saw a great multitude, and he was moved with compassion for them and healed their sick. When it was evening, his disciples came to him saying, and this is men, right? This is not Jesus. This is men just like me and you. And he said, they came to him saying, this is a deserted place, and the hour is already late. Send the multitudes away that they may go into villages and buy themselves food, which is probably exactly what I would have done. You've done enough, Jesus. We know, you know the news that maybe they don't know. You've already done healings. You've already taken care of them. Now let them take care of themselves. But what did Jesus do? He's in the midst of the beginning of a very bad day. Verse 16, but Jesus said to them, they do not need to go away. You give them something to eat. That's what we're called to do day in and day out in our lives, in our daily walk, to take care of others. You know, the acronym JOY is Jesus, others, and yourself. And that can get you in a lot of trouble. So I tell people, don't take Jesus out of the top ever, but the others in yourself can flip-flop every now and then. But the majority of the time, you probably will feel better if you're worried about others. So he said, you give them something to eat. And we know this story. They said to him, we only have 5 loaves and 2 fish. And he said, bring them here to me. And we know this story, but I'm going to read it. Then he commanded the multitude to sit down on the grass. He took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he blessed and broke and gave the loaves to the disciples, and the disciples gave to the multitudes. Verse 20, so they all ate and were filled, and they took up 12 baskets full of the fragments that remained. I never go by this verse without pointing this out. The original name was disciple bags, not doggy bags. You got it right here in the Bible. I mean, there was 12 disciples. They all worked. The multitudes worked, but they all got something to take with them. So you can freak the waitress out and whatever and go, I'm going to take some disciple bags. And they're going to go, what are you talking about? It's right there in the Bible. 12 disciples, 12 baskets. Verse 21, now those who had eaten were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. Immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he sent the multitude away. So for the second time in this story, we're seeing him saying, hey, I got to go. The first time he went off on his own, the people came, he took care of the people, and then his people came and said, hey, tell them all to go, and he said, no, we're not done here. Now he feels like he's done, it appears. He's still got to probably process this bad news he got originally, and he's probably more tired now by just doing ministry. So he's sending the disciples away, he's sending the multitudes away. Verse 23, and when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. That's the first time in the story we know why he went away. I'm sure the first time he went away to be alone. I can only imagine he went away to pray, to be with his heavenly Father, to gather his thoughts, this horrible news. Did he start to think, I've got to share this news with others? We don't know exactly, but we know getting away was important to him. He's done it twice now, and this second time it says to pray. So it says, now when evening came, he was alone there. So I'm hoping he got at least a few hours, to kind of process this horrible day. And it said he was alone there, verse 24, but the boat was now in the middle of the sea. So he had told the disciples to get in the boat and head out. The boat's in the middle of the sea, and it's tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. Verse 25, now it was in the 4th watch of the night that Jesus went to them walking on the sea. And we know, if you know the time keeping back then, the 4th watch is probably between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. So he was flesh, blood, and bone just like us, right? We understand that Jesus was all man and all God. But he's awake. At some time in this 3 a.m. to 6, maybe he slept for a few hours, we don't know. We do know he was there in the evening. He was alone. He prayed. He was still there in the evening. The 4th watch, he's awake. And because he's Jesus, he's going for a walk. And because he's Jesus, he's walking on water. So don't try to get up at 3 a.m. and walk out in your pool. It's probably not going to work. But he was walking on water. Still, in the process of this, maybe he's at hour 18 now. If he found out around 9 a.m. or so, it's not been a full 24 hours, but his day's not getting better. His night's not getting better. But he's out on a walk, and he's walking on water. Verse 26, and when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, "It is a ghost," and they cried out for fear. This whole story has about 8 weeks of sermon series any pastor could work with. I'm not going to do that to you. But they think it's a ghost, so they're not expecting him. He's out, probably not expecting them, thinking, I still need time, I still need some solitude, I still need to get away. But it says what happens here in verse 27. When they cry out, it's a ghost, they cry out of fear. Verse 27, but immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Be of good cheer, it is I, do not be afraid." Now, what would you have done? Would you have been like, maybe they don't see me, let me go this way? Would you have said, it's not a ghost, you're all right, and kept going? He did neither. He fully engaged, right? He said, be of good cheer. He identified himself, it is I, do not be afraid. And Peter, we all know Peter, we all can kind of relate to Peter, kind of the ADD disciple, very compulsive, does things without thinking, and I'm like, that's my guy, I can relate to him. So Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it is you, there's a whole lot in that statement right there. What do you mean, if it is you? The guy's walking on water. He's not a ghost. And you're wondering if it's one or the other. Decide, what are you thinking? But he said, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. So that is all of Peter in a nutshell. I don't know if that's true. Hey, I know that's true. Let me go out there with you. And what does Jesus do? One word, verse 29. So he said, come. And when Peter had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. So amazingly, in the presence of Jesus, with no touching, no healing, no special power, he said, come. That's the special power. Jesus said, come, and he's immediately walking on water. When you're in that kind of presence, you can do amazing things. And when you believe, you can do amazing things. So Peter's walking, and we know the end of this story. I'm going to finish up here. But when he saw the wind was boisterous, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, saying, Lord, save me. So we know that whole way to look at that. He was, apparently we believe, looking at Jesus, calling out to Jesus, interacting with Jesus, and all was good, and he's walking. The other disciples had to be, are you kidding me? This guy's walking on water just like Jesus. But then what did he do? He took his eyes off Jesus. You all know the story. He started looking at the wind and the sea and said, I'm in trouble. Well, if you're looking around at you, yeah, if you're looking up to him, you're not in trouble. So once he took his eyes off Jesus, we know what happened. He began to sink. He cried out, saying, Lord, save me. Verse 31, and immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and said to him, O you of little faith, why did you doubt? And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. Verse 33, I'll finish with. Then those who were in the boat came and worshipped him, saying, truly you are the Son of God. So like I said, there's an 8-week series there that I'm not going to give you, but we can see what Peter did. We can see what the disciples did. We can see the miracles that Jesus did. I mean, there's a whole lot there. You can read that verse by verse and day by day for a couple weeks and get more and more out of it. Certainly you can read commentary, you can read different translations. I want to focus today on Jesus, right in the middle of it. Fully man and fully God. And we know that, guess what? Jesus got tired. We know that Jesus had a bad day. We know that Jesus had emotions. We know he had anger. We certainly know he had love. We know he had patience. But having a bad day is having a bad day. And when you're all man or all human, it's a challenge. It's a real challenge. So I know, I've shared with a few people, I actually spent 35 years at public supermarkets. I was actually a produce manager. I never planned on doing this, but I had gone to seminary between 2007 and 2013. And it was actually a seminary extension program that was offered through Brevard Baptist Association. But it actually comes from a brick and mortar school, which is in New Orleans, which is a Baptist seminary in New Orleans. And they offer these seminary extension programs. They don't offer them anymore. There was one going on in Orlando. But it took 6 years, or right at 7 years, going to class 24 weeks a year. And you would normally only go once a week for 2 to 3 to 4 hours. And then you had a lot of work to do throughout the week and had to turn in the next week, so on and so forth. But 35 years at Publix, there was a lot of pressure and stress. And I've joked with people, as a produce manager, I dealt with the fruits and vegetables. As a pastor, I deal with the fruits of the Spirit. They're uniquely different. I can look at a tomato and tell you how many days are left before it's rotten, whether it's going to be sweet or not. I can tell you more than you'll ever want to know about produce. I know all 9 of the fruits of the Spirit, and I struggle with them. And some of them are ingrained in me. It's my natural personality. Some I have to look at daily and go, this needs to be part of who I am. But when we deal with pressure like Jesus, we need to kind of have a battle plan. We need to kind of think. And as I prepared this, I knew what I did at Publix because that was where the pressure was the most, right? Now, 8 years, kind of retired, but being a pastor at a church, probably the most pressure is at home with the wife. I've been married 20 years this coming July. And, greatest 20 years of my life and the 15 best years of her life, she said. So I'm happy about that. 3 out of 4, you can't go wrong. But that's where pressure can be now. When you think you love someone enough to spend 24/7 with them, you may find out they don't love you that much, or you struggle with that. So seeing what Jesus did, one of the first things he did was he kind of retreated, right? He got this news and he withdrew. He got this news that they went and told him what's happened to John the Baptist. When he heard it, he departed from there by boat to a deserted place. So my thoughts on that is, and I've done this many times in my life, I need to retreat at times. And it may just be a few moments. It may be, if it's at the house, it may be, give me a minute, and you step away, you go outside, you do whatever. If it's in the workplace, you may not have that option, or you may go, let me finish this and then I'm going wherever. If it's your own office, we used to tell people at Publix, I did a lot of training for people going into management. And when things aren't going right, I'm like, if you get off the sales floor, you've gotten rid of about 80% of your aggravation. Yep. And I would tell them, here's the deal. It says out front, where shopping is a pleasure. Doesn't say anything about working. Shopping. We want you to come in here and be happy to give us your money. But I'm going to have to work to get your money, right? I got to make sure the store's in good shape and everything's there and so on and so forth. So I taught people, and of course myself, would get off the sales floor and get in the back hall. That can almost be sometimes just as bad because you've got all the vendors, you've got a lot of employees back there, you've got other managers back there, So then you kind of retreat. We know that Jesus just went away. It says that he departed from there by himself. And that's all we get. But guess what happened immediately? That bad day didn't end. It wasn't like everybody knew Rodney had a bad day out on the sales force, so we're going to be kind to him the rest of the day and never bother him. You still got a job to do. And as believers, we've got a job to do, right? If we're going to walk the walk, you can't just sit on the sidelines, right? You got to walk. So he retreated, and we saw that again here, halfway through the story when he went up to the mountain to pray, and he seemed to get more time then, and it was just kind of God's plan that he got that time. There was nothing happened for, we think, those 6, 8, maybe 10 hours. But this first time when he got away, it didn't go quite, he probably needed more time than he got, right? But what did he do? It said, but when the multitudes heard it, they followed him on foot from the cities. So that moment of solitude that you and I need, that we need to find out about and find out where it is and maybe work on that, workplace, home place, wherever, it's not a sign of, I'm weak, I can't handle it. It's a sign of strength and wisdom and intelligence. There's nothing wrong with telling somebody, I'm going to call you back in a little bit here, okay? And they don't even need to know that you're angry. They don't even know that you're ready to tell them, exactly how you feel. You're like, hey, man, let me call you back in a few minutes, And the same thing with family, with coworkers, with whatever. There's wisdom in that to know what works for you. And I would joke with people, and I would tell them, go in the back hall and just, figure it out. Go do something else for a little bit, whatever. And there were times we were in the back hall and you've got coworkers or whatever, and I'm like, you know what, there's another door that goes out behind the store, and there's not a lot of people out there at all. Maybe you need to go out behind the store, right? So we need to know where that place is for us. And I encourage you to think about that. And it's great to communicate that. Certainly with, people that are close to you, if you just need a moment, maybe an hour, whatever, that's something that it will help your day process better, will help you deal with that pressure, and it really kind of sharpens you. It really kind of, and there are times we can prepare for it too. Of course, we know that, hey, I'm going to the doctor today, I'm going to the bank, I'm going to talk to my brother about this situation. Of course, that involves prayer and preparing yourself and so on and so forth. But usually bad days pop up without us knowing. And I tell everybody, most of us, especially even as a new Christian, certainly as a mature Christian, we're really good at tests. We're horrible at pop quizzes. Do you remember in school when you'd come in and the teacher would stand up and say, take your books and papers and put them under your desk? And you're like, oh. And then they would say, okay, here's a piece of paper, here's the test. We're giving you a pop quiz. It's not going to count for your grade, but I want to know how much you know. And we're like, oh. But if you knew you had a test on Friday, you would start to study maybe Thursday night, but you would do better on the test than you do the pop quiz. I think the most common place we get a pop quiz nowadays is in traffic and driving. and you do not want that. I'm the pastor of First Baptist Church on your windshield when you're in traffic, unless you're really driving like the pastor of First Baptist, right? So that's where our pop quizzes come, and when you get to wherever you're going, you're like, I don't think anybody recognized me, Lord. I know you saw that. Please forgive me. But that's a big deal. We kind of prepare yourselves for that kind of pressure that comes on. But work on finding that solitary place. Like I know me, a big thing about traveling, if I've got music and a good cup of coffee, I'll drive through downtown wherever all day, and I'm like, it's no big deal. That guy, he must be in a hurry. I don't care. But if I've got other things on my mind, I struggle with that. Second thing I want you to know about Jesus and a bad day, you really don't get a pass on having compassion for others. And what we do that's even worse, that Jesus didn't show this behavior, and I think probably if everybody here was honest, you have a bad day with person A, and person B pays for it, right? And maybe person C and D. So you have it out with whomever, and you just don't go that route. I'm not going to, make it worse. But you walk away and you make it worse with this guy and this person and this person. And then if you're really not doing it right, you come home and you got it all with you. And you're like, you won't believe. And you got to relive it all and rehash it all. And the wife or the kids or whomever is like, why don't you go back there and fix all that before you bring it home next time, right? So we don't get a pass on compassion. And it's interesting how Jesus dealt with that, right? They came to him. The people came to him, and what did he do? He knew he was in charge of the healing. And it says in verse 15 there, when he went out and saw the great multitude, verse 14, he was moved with compassion for them, and he healed their sick, period. Doesn't say he was still struggling. Doesn't say, well, some of them really didn't need it that bad. Some of them have dealt with their issues for a long time. They can wait another week. It just says he had compassion and he healed their sick. And of course, I'll tell you what, as men, we're called to be the leaders. We're called to be those in charge of certainly our family, of our children. In so many other areas, we're kind of called upon. You better be able to put yourself second every now and then. And just like I said, that acronym of joy, Jesus, others, and you, I've seen people bury themselves with the others and run full steam away from ministry, from volunteering, from working with their family and kids because I can't deal with it. So you is important. You is very important. Jesus, others, and you. But there are times, whether it's a bad day or not, others need you. And that's exactly where Jesus was. Others needed him. It's just that simple. So in spite of the bad day, he was there for them. And then it's interesting, he seemed to be ready. We know it seems like he was done. He had compassion and he healed them. And it says, when it was evening, his disciples came to him saying, so they've brought this need to him. And it was almost one of those deals, I feel like, where I've had people come to me and say, hey, what do you think? And I'm like, you're probably going to be sorry you asked, but here's what I think, and maybe it involves them or some work or us together doing things. And they thought they were going to come dump it on me. And I'm like, you know what we can do? You know, and anytime I use the word we, I'm like, we means you and me, you know. So they came to him, maybe thinking they're helping him. You know, hey, we have to send the multitudes away that they may go in the village and buy themselves food. The hour is late. I got a thought, if at 10:30 at night your kid comes running in and says, I've got a horrible fever and stuff, you're not going to go, well, the hour is late. Sleep, we'll deal with it in the morning. If the wife comes running in and says, this is going on, you're going to take care of it. When others need you, whether it's the workplace, whether it's home, we need to be there for them whenever possible. And Jesus does it in a very unique, very wise way. First of all, he says, they don't need to go anywhere. You guys need to do it. So he recruits others. He recruits others. And if you have any role of leadership, once again, even if it's just you and your neighbor, certainly if you have family, if you work, if you have any responsibilities out there, don't try to do it all yourself. You'll run yourself ragged, and I don't care what kind of a hero you are, and I've tried to be a hero plenty of times. I usually end up at the end of the day a zero or just barely, you know, we got it done. It could have been better, but I think I controlled too much or all those things, and I'm very slowly but surely as I'm aging figuring out, you know what, it's much better when they do it. You know, not that I try to pass anything off that's my responsibility, but he made it clear, y'all are going to be a part of this, right? He drew them in. So it said, he said, give them something to eat. And they said, we only have the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. He said, bring them here to me. And you know, there are times your presence means more than anything. Your voice. I mean, I couldn't do this always at Publix. It's kind of been a rule, and I think most pastors and most people in ministry, and hopefully most people who are a little older and wiser realize how important that gift of a wife is, right? And I almost never, ever, ever, ever don't answer the phone for the wife. Now, she'll tell you, I've called you 3 times. I'm like, I didn't see it. I didn't, you know. I did turn all the sounds off about 10 years ago. That was the most wonderful thing I ever did. But I feel it vibrate, and I hardly ever miss, but every now and then I call her right back or whomever. But there are certain people you need to be there with your presence. He was there. He said, come bring them to me. He didn't say, y'all do it. You got enough. If you need me, holler. He was right there. And when they said, here's what we got, he knew it was enough. And you can do that with whatever influence you have. You can show others it's enough, but you probably have to be involved. You do have to have that compassion. And the interesting thing is, when he knew he couldn't pass on compassion, even in having the bad day, he knew he needed others to help. All those are things we need to learn when we're having a bad day. I can't just tell others you're on your own. I don't care. You don't want to do that, right? We can't say, I'll do it all then. You just made my day worse. I'll do it all. We need to kind of recruit others, and he definitely did that. But it's interesting that Jesus knew he wanted them to help, but he needed his Father to help, right? Because it says, and he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven. Well, we can do the same thing. We can talk Jesus, we can talk God. Whenever we're having that bad day and we have that little bit of solitude, first of all, we see after this event that he does go to pray. I think the first time around he was doing some form of prayer, some form of I'm in the presence of my Father. And, you know, it's always fun to think people go to God and say, I don't know if you heard. Yeah, he heard. But you can only imagine what Jesus felt when his cousin, his fellow brother, he's just got this horrible news and he withdrew. And then he's pulled right back in and he's going to take care of others again. And he says, give me what you got, but he looked up to heaven. And we know he gave thanks. We know he broke the bread. So we need to, when we're having that bad day, recruit others and certainly make him a part of it. It may be a simple prayer on our own. It may be gathering people together. That'll change the whole room. That's why before every staff meeting at church, they have a little prayer. And there's only 5 or 6 guys going, oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. Anyway, you know, but it'll change the atmosphere. And you can do it with your wife, your kids. I used to do it all the time at Publix with people. And I probably 15 or 20 years before I retired, somebody kind of called out one day. We were talking about things, and they said, don't waste your time telling somebody, well, I'll pray about that. If you got 30 seconds, pray with them. And it was kind of life-changing to me, and I started doing that. I'd do it on the sales floor with customers. I'd do it in the back room. I'd go in an office and go, hey, man, come here, man, come here. I'm like, I know this is bad, and I know you're having a hard time, man. We got to get this done, but then I'm going to get you out of here, blah, blah, blah. Can we pray about this real quick? And everything changes. I could still be the jerk boss and say, okay, I'm glad we prayed. You still need to get that done before you go home, But it changes the dynamic. And I try to, of course, never use that to manipulate anybody, but I genuinely care. And once again, if it's the phone call, if it's the whatever interruption, whatever you can do to show compassion, get others involved, get him involved, and make yourself available. So we've got two things that Jesus kind of did. He certainly withdrew. He's going to do it again here right now in this story. Everybody's different. That's the greatest thing I can do. And I've learned as I've aged, and I'm still a little bit young, not much, but I crave solitude. I really crave solitude. And it's not sitting in a room by myself with the doors closed. Normally, once again, I keep talking coffee. I like a good cup of coffee. I like some music. And I'll be on the laptop. I'll be on the desktop at home. It's kind of neat. This job, when I was with Publix, you're in the store 60, 70 hours a week. This position, I'm here. That's kind of a good thing. And I'm like, I'm going to get through this. I'm going to get my truck. I'm going to run through Dunkin' maybe, or Starbucks, or I always carry a cup of coffee with me. I'm going to get a few moments, And I love having those, 8, 10 times a day different prayers for 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 minutes. That creates a lot of pressure release right there.
Amen.
So he gets away. He has compassion. The last thing I want you to understand, and this is Jesus, he had his Father. Well, guess what we have? We have his Father, but we have Jesus with us as well. The former pastor at the church I'm at, his name is Dennis Phillips, and he's written a couple books, really a wise guy, and he came up with this study kind of probably 5 or so years ago. If we could get just 3 people 7 times a week, once a day, just to say when somebody says, how you doing? And I've been at my church 2.5 years. Dominic's there. He can tell you. I tend not to do this, but I've got about 5 or 10 people who were trained much better by the last pastor than me. And I spent 35 years at Publix, and somebody says, how you doing? I'm like, I'm doing all right, man. How you doing? That's always been my response. How you doing? I'm doing good, man. You doing all right? Well, he got these people at church trained, and there's 10 of them that remind me of this on a regular basis. They'll walk up. I'm the pastor of the church. Hey, Thomas, how you doing? With Jesus, I'm great. And I'm like, yeah, right. With Jesus, I'm great too. It's not a natural response. It should be. And we need to realize with this bad day we're having, I'm going to talk about this, with Jesus, it's all okay. It's all good. You can go further and say, with Jesus, I'm great. And that's a great way to kind of evangelize without evangelizing. We actually learned in seminary, there's many ways to evangelize. Sometimes you have to talk, but sometimes you don't, right? You need to evangelize. When necessary, use words. But that simple statement. So Jesus at this time, I'm not going to say Jesus had Jesus, he had his Father, but look at the disciples who, had been working. They had done what Jesus told them to do, and then he said, go away. So now they're gone away, and now they're dealing with their own bad day, their own storm. And here comes a person, they don't know who it is in the beginning, dealing with his own bad day. And how did these two get together? The same way we get together when they called out to him. They called out, it is a ghost. So once again, there are times I say to myself, can you believe this? Or I don't believe this. Well, I know he knows it. Not only does not believe it, he brought that to me this day, right? I learned years ago, my whole life, I've never been one to really raise my hands in church. It's just not what I do. I think it's great. I wish it was more of a natural thing to me. But I started doing this probably 5 or 10 years ago, and it's kind of changed the way I think of my day at times. And I'll do it sometimes in the beginning of the day, sometimes throughout the day. But when I'll have that 5 or 10 minutes, whether I'm sitting at home, I'll do it driving. I keep one hand on the wheel. But when I can, I'll raise both hands up. And it just feels good to hold your hands up for a minute or so. And I'll just kind of palms up, say, I know who you are. I know you're holy. I know you're separate. I know you're not like me. I know you're worthy of honor. You're worthy of praise. I know you're holy and I'm supposed to be holy. You say that in your word. And I'll hold them up for 10, 15, 20, 30 seconds. And then I'll take them just like they are and I'll put them down. And I think about, okay, I got to get a lot of stuff done today, Lord. And so I'm going to need these hands. I got to get going, okay? which is a weird way to start your day, right? But you think about what I'm going to work on today. And I think about, let me let go of what I don't really need to worry about. Maybe I'm still angry about yesterday's bad day. Maybe I'm dreading this situation, which I always think is going to be worse than it is. And so for the next 5 hours, I'm going to feel that pressure and that emotion and that stress. Let me let go of what I don't need to worry about. Let me let go of it. And then I'll do that for, and sometimes I'm driving and I'll do this. If somebody drives by me, I'm like, I'm not really doing anything but holding my hand up, And then I'll pull that hand down and kind of let it sit there. I'll put it on the armrest sometimes or hold it. And then the last thing I'll do is I'll turn it like that and say, give me what you want me to have. You know what I want? I want nothing but smooth, happy, everybody says I'm the greatest, and everything's going exactly as planned. No interruptions. I got home early. Greatest day ever. They don't happen too often. And really they do in reality if you look at it. But just that, you're amazing, you're holy, I worship you, you are not me and I'm thankful you are you and I can be part of you. Let me let go of what I don't need to worry about and let me receive what I need to receive. And to finish up, Jesus was immediately there for them, right? The minute they called out, he was immediately there. So we can call out to him and say, I need you with me. Whatever I'm letting go of, you have the power to let me let go of it. You have the power to clear my mind where I haven't even thought about it all day. You have the power of giving me what I need and letting me deal with it. Don't let my emotions, don't let my flesh, don't let my need for solitude or my need to take care of myself and not take care of others, don't let that rule. In verse 27 and 31, the words immediately happened. Verse 27 said, immediately Jesus stretched out his hand. What he didn't do was he didn't stop the storm. He didn't make their lives great, but he said, come to me, right? And they did that. And guess what? When they drew closer to him, nothing changed. Peter was crazy enough to get more involved with the storm, right? But the other ones are like, okay, now I know who Jesus is, and you know what? We're a part of him right now, and guess what? It's still a mess. The boat's still rocking. Peter's crazy. He's trying to walk on the water. So when Jesus says, come to me, he doesn't say, come and everything will be good. That bad day may not get any better, and you're right where Jesus wants you to be. I was a kid in the 70s, on Saturday night, Mom and Dad would argue like most families about whether you're going to watch Lawrence Welk or Hee Haw. Dad won a lot, and we watched Hee Haw, and I thought Hee Haw was great. I liked Lawrence Welk too, but Hee Haw was better. But they had those four guys that would lay around and sing this one song, gloom, despair, and agony on me, deep, dark depression, excessive misery. If it weren't for bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. Gloom, despair, you guys know it. You know it. Well, guess what? They should have been singing with Jesus. I'm great with Jesus, but that would have never flown, right? But you need to know it's okay to get away. You need to know that you don't get a pass on, I don't have time for anything or anybody today. It's all about me. Now, maybe you plan a day all about you. Maybe you tell everybody, hey, Friday, I'm not available. Hey, next week, or hey, that's what we do with vacations and stuff, right? But if you're going to be a part of any group, certainly your family, your workplace, anywhere you serve, you're going to need to know that you need to be available. And the last thing, you're allowed to have solitude, but you got to be available, and you got to understand you're not alone. And I hope you have those relationships where you can call the buddy up or call the wife or the child or even the grandchild and say, guess what? I talked to the wife last night, and her and the daughter-in-law, they get along great, but there was a few things said, and each of them don't know the other one's mad, which is awesome. And I said, well, maybe she meant this, and she wasn't mad, whatever. And I said something to my wife. I'm like, do you ever say? She's like, no, you're the only one I vent to, which I love. And I'm like, great. And I tell her, sadly, you're the only one I vent to, too. And I got a lot to vent about, so let me go next. But I want you to know that having a bad day is not an ungodly thing. It's not a, you know what, you're just not really where you need to be. You may be right where you're supposed to be. You may be right in the middle of that boat. You may be like Jesus, who his cousin, the one who announced him, the one who baptized him, right? I mean, this is a close relation, same age, gone. And Jesus, was already dealing with the pressure, knowing what's coming up for him. So if we're going to be Christ-like, we can be Christ-like with all the love, with all the easy stuff. That's not always easy. But we can be Christ-like with those bad days. Don't be afraid to get away. Don't be afraid to have others join in with you, and certainly take it to him, and know that he's always with you immediately when asked. And he's there even when we don't even know he's there, right? That's when things happen. We're like, man, God worked it out. I hadn't even talked to him about it. Any thoughts on that? Anybody looking forward to a bad day here next day or two?
Yes.
Yes, I love it. That'll be a pop quiz that maybe you'll pass for the first time in a while, right? You're like, I knew this was coming. He talked about traffic. He talked about the wife. But I hope you have that strength, that foundation. I hope you have, just like you have right here, these fellow brothers. I hope you're a part of some church, perhaps, or some church group. Some group of men that can kind of relate to. Certainly in the workplace, I hope you have that. And certainly at home, that's a big deal. So you may have to work at it to have it at home at times, but I hope that's something that you have those avenues to go down when you have a detour. You're like, you know what? I know my way home. I'm going this way today. Can I pray for us?
Yes, please.
Our Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for the gift of your Son. And not only does he provide the one and only way of salvation by faith in him, Lord, by faith in your Son, by the blood on the cross, we know that's the only way. Nothing we do gets us to heaven. But I thank you for the example of him coming to earth, of him being fully God and fully man, and we can see how we can be Christ-like. And I know each person here probably has chaotic times. There is chaos that we bring on ourselves, that others dump at our door at times. And I pray that none of us feel alone. None of us feel like we're overpowered and overcome and overwhelmed by these things. We know in John 16:33 it says, in this world you will have trouble. But we know the end of that verse, it says, but take heart, I have overcome the world. So let each person here, let each man here feel comfortable saying, with Jesus I'm great, with Jesus I'm great. I may need to get away from others, but I'm going to stay with him. I may need to continue to work with others, but I'm going to call him into this. Let all of us work with him. And certainly let us know wherever we're at and whatever we're doing that we're not alone, that by calling out to him immediately, he will be in our presence. He will reach out, maybe not change anything, but he'll reach out there and be with us and for us and come alongside us to help us walk through what we have to walk through. I thank you for this ministry. I thank you for this group of men. I pray that the rest of our day will be a good day. I pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I thank you for your time. Thank you.